In the wake of Iran's heavy rocket assault on Israeli cities and military sites, Washington didn't wait long to hit back. Within hours, American cruise missiles found an Iranian warship in the Persian Gulf and sank it beneath the waves. Secondary strikes then targeted fuel depots lining Iran's coastline. Storage tanks ignited, sending towering fireballs into the sky visible for miles around. Simultaneously, a directive for full-scale combat mobilization went out to every branch of the U.S. military. All available units got the word to shift into immediate action mode. Out on the flight line, the response was already unfolding in real time. Two CH-53 Sea Stallion heavy-lift helicopters sat on the tarmac, rotors spinning, with ground personnel keeping their distance from the rotor wash. Inside the briefing room, the helicopter crews ran through their pre-flight rituals. Flight suits were zipped up, survival vests fastened, sidearms inspected, and helmets secured. Nearby, Marines had split into two groups, each assigned to one of the aircraft. They were loaded for combat, full battle rattle, plate carriers, Kevlar helmets, M4s, loaded magazines, fragmentation grenades, radios, hydration packs, and meal rations. At the order, the first wave of Marines filed into the lead CH-53 through its side personnel door. Across the same airfield, a CH-47 Chinook was preparing for a different task. Troops climbed up the rear ramp and took their positions inside the cargo bay. Below, ground crews fastened a towed howitzer to the helicopter's external cargo sling. This artillery piece would travel dangling beneath the fuselage. Lanyards and shackles were inspected, the load was confirmed secure, and the Chinook rose from the tarmac, the gun swaying gently underneath. Skimming low over the landscape, the helicopter made its way toward a military encampment. On approach, it descended, the crew chief calling out corrections to guide the pilots until the gun carriage settled onto the dirt. The hooks were released, and the howitzer sat firmly on the ground. The Chinook moved to a nearby clearing, touched down, and the Marines stepped off the ramp. They immediately swarmed the artillery piece. Ammo crates were broken open, rounds prepped, and the crew started establishing a firing position. Trails were spread, spades dug into the earth, sights mounted, and rounds stacked within reach, ready to go hot. As dusk settled in, two additional helicopters arrived at a separate forward location carrying more Marines. The aircraft touched down in an open stretch of flat ground, completely exposed, no structures, no concealment. Troops piled out and fanned into the darkness. The light was fading fast. There were no tents, no prefab shelters, no running water, no electricity. This was a bare-bones fighting position in the middle of nowhere. The Marines quickly formed a defensive perimeter. Crew-served weapons were positioned to cover the most probable avenues of approach, and watch rotations were set. Some dug shallow fighting holes with entrenching tools. Others laid out their sleeping systems on the bare ground, ponchos, sleep sacks, ammunition stacked within arm's reach. They ate MREs cold and sipped from their canteens. As the temperature continued to drop, they hunkered down for a night under the stars, with nothing overhead but open sky. Through the dark hours, helicopters made repeated supply runs to the position, flying blacked out, pilots using night vision goggles to navigate. Each flight ferried in more equipment, wooden crates packed with ammunition, more anti-tank weapons, mortar systems and high-explosive rounds, pallets of radio batteries, and field medical kits. On one of the later flights, lightweight tactical vehicles rolled off a Chinook's rear ramp. They were driven off and tucked under camouflage netting in concealed spots around the perimeter. Comms specialists got to work setting up satellite antennas and hailing the command post. By the time the eastern sky began to lighten, that empty patch of ground had been transformed into a fully functional forward operating base, complete with vehicles, weapons stockpiles, supplies, and active communications. As first light broke, the Marines started moving out from the camp. They broke into squads and headed toward their designated sectors. The first task was reconnaissance. Squads moved through the terrain slow and deliberate, scanning the landscape, noting natural cover, marking ridgelines and dead ground that could hide enemy movement. They plotted fields of fire and possible ambush sites. Everything was recorded and relayed back to the command element at the main camp. Sniper teams climbed into elevated positions overlooking the surrounding area. They unpacked their rifles, adjusted bipods, and arranged their gear. Spotting scopes, laser rangefinders, wind meters, data books. One man behind the rifle, the other behind the spotting scope. They began methodically glassing the terrain, sweeping sector by sector, ranging landmarks, cataloging potential target points, and logging any movement they caught. The infantry squads ran through their combat drills. They practiced bounding movement across open ground, one team dashing forward while the other laid down cover, then swapping. They rehearsed close-quarters battle drills, stacking on a door, breaching, entering, clearing corners, calling out threats. They worked on moving through low ground, using wadis and draws to stay off the skyline. Every movement was low, either crouched or crawling. Speed and stealth were the priority. Squad leaders watched each iteration, corrected mistakes, and ran them again. Over and over, the cycle repeated until every Marine moved without hesitation, without noise, without exposing himself to open sight lines. Fire teams drilled immediate action drills, reacting to fire from the front, the flank, or a full ambush. They practiced casualty evacuation, dragging a wounded Marine to cover while keeping up suppressive fire. Machine gun teams set up their weapons, marked primary and secondary positions, and practiced moving between them under simulated pressure. Once the training sessions wrapped, the Marines filtered back to the camp. Weapons got cleaned, gear got checked, and defensive positions were maintained. They waited. When the alert sounded, they'd be ready. No hesitation. They'd already done it 100 times. The sun climbed higher over the forward operating base, burning off the last of the morning chill. Inside the command tent, intelligence reports were coming in every few minutes. Drone feeds showed Iranian Revolutionary Guard units repositioning along key highways. Electronic surveillance picked up increased radio traffic near known launch sites. The lull was ending. At the sniper position overlooking the eastern ridgeline, the spotter adjusted his focus. Through the scope, he caught something. Dust, movement, a column of technical vehicles moving single file through a dry riverbed. He tapped the shooter's shoulder and pointed. The shooter shifted his rifle, settling the crosshairs on the lead truck. He didn't fire. Not yet. The order hadn't come. Back at the camp, squad leaders gathered around a map spread across the hood of a tactical vehicle. The coordinates from the sniper team were plotted. The enemy column was advancing along a route that would bring them within striking distance of the FOB within 2 hours. The question wasn't if they would attack. It was where. The captain made the call. 2 squads would move forward and establish an ambush position along the riverbed. A 3rd squad would stay back as a quick reaction force. Machine guns would go with the ambush. Mortars would remain at the FOB, ready to drop rounds on call. The Marines moved out at a jog, staying low, using the terrain to mask their movement. They reached the chosen position, a shallow depression with good cover and clear lines of fire into the riverbed. Gunners set up their M240s on tripods, feeding belts of 7.62 into the feed trays. The rest of the squad spread out, finding natural concealment behind rocks and scrub. Radios crackled with quiet confirmations. Everyone was in place. The wait was the hardest part. Minutes stretched. The sun beat down. Sweat dripped from under Kevlar helmets. Hands stayed on rifles. Eyes stayed on the riverbed. Then the first vehicle appeared. It was a Toyota pickup with a heavy machine gun mounted in the bed, 2 fighters in the cab, 2 more in the back. It moved slowly, kicking up dust. Behind it, a 2nd truck, then a 3rd. The column stretched out, maybe a dozen vehicles total, carrying what looked like a reinforced platoon. The squad leader watched through his binoculars, waiting for the right moment. He wanted them fully inside the kill zone. The lead truck passed the first marker, then the second. The 3rd truck was just entering the zone when the squad leader keyed his radio and gave the word, "Initiate, initiate, initiate." The machine guns opened up first, tearing into the lead truck. The windshield dissolved. The truck swerved, rolled, and came to rest against the bank of the riverbed. The 2nd gun shifted fire to the rear vehicle, trapping the column. Small arms fire erupted from the Marine positions, rounds tearing into the trucks and the fighters scrambling to return fire. The ambush was perfect. Caught in the open, the Iranians had nowhere to go. Some dove behind their vehicles, only to find the cover inadequate against the volume of fire. Others tried to run up the banks, but the Marines had those angles covered too. Within minutes, the shooting started to taper off. A few isolated pops, then silence. The squad leader gave the order to cease fire. The air smelled of burnt gunpowder and diesel. Smoke curled from the wrecked vehicles. No one moved in the riverbed. Security teams pushed forward to check the bodies and gather intelligence. Weapons, documents, phones, maps. Everything was collected and bagged. The squad leader called it in. Ambush successful. Enemy force destroyed. No Marine casualties. Request guidance. Back at the FOB, the captain acknowledged the report and passed it up the chain. Within an hour, a supply helicopter was inbound to extract the captured materials and drop off fresh ammunition. The Marines in the riverbed pulled back to a covered position to wait. They knew this was just one engagement. The Iranians would adjust. They'd come back smarter, harder. But for now, they had won the first round. As the helicopter's rotors became audible in the distance, the squad leader looked out over the riverbed. Burning vehicles, scattered equipment, the still forms of enemy fighters. This was what they had trained for. This was what waited at the end of all those drills. He turned away and signaled his men to prepare for extraction. The war was young, and there would be plenty more where that came from.